He had everything: beauty, money, the finest medical education in the United States. He was the perfect son of a millionaire family, destined to marry the daughter of a pharmaceutical industry mogul. An arranged marriage that promised to unite two empires, but would destroy his freedom. But on the night when his future seemed set in stone, an unexpected encounter changed everything. In the hospital emergency room, he met a homeless woman, her body marked by burns and her soul wounded by years of abandonment. A woman who, to save a mother and baby from a fire, put her own life at risk. Nobody gave anything for her. Nobody, except him. The young doctor didn't know why, but he felt like he already knew those tired eyes, that silent courage. And when he remembered who she was, everything inside him crumbled. It was in that instant that he made the craziest decision of his life. He asked that woman to marry him. Not in the future, not someday, but right there, right now. What he didn't know is that this marriage would change not only his destiny, but would set fire to his own family and the elite that had always tried to control him. Before we continue the story, tell me in the comments, from which city and country are you watching us now? In New York's high society, the Collins surname was synonymous with power. Richard Collins, the patriarch, was more than just a hospital director. He owned a network of clinics called Collins Health Institute, spread across several American states, and his influence reached politicians, businessmen, and even medical universities. A man of harsh words, always impeccable in custom-made suits, who believed that money could buy everything: respect, status, and even love. For Richard, life was a chessboard, and people were pieces to be moved in favor of the empire he had built. His son was no exception. Since childhood, Ethan had been trained to be the perfect heir. "You're not like other boys," his father would say. "You carry the weight of our name." His mother, Margaret Collins, was the image of sophistication, always present at charity dinners, always smiling in the society columns. But behind the expensive dresses and sparkling jewelry, there was a cold heart. For Margaret, emotions were weaknesses. What mattered was keeping up appearances. When Ethan cried as a child, she wouldn't hug him. She would just say, "Collins children don't cry, they learn to win." Ethan grew up in this environment, between marble walls, expensive paintings, and suffocating silence. In the eyes of the world, he had everything: beauty, intelligence, the finest medical education at Johns Hopkins, and now a bright future ahead of the Collins Health Institute. But inside him, the emptiness grew. He was respected by everyone, except himself. That's when his father decided on the next move: marriage. "You're going to marry Victoria Hale," announced Richard in his steel voice during a family dinner. Victoria Hale, the only daughter of Charles Hale, owner of Pharma Trust, one of the country's largest pharmaceutical industries. Rich, influential, and unbearable. Victoria was known in social circles for humiliating waiters, treating employees like they were invisible, and collecting suitors like someone collects designer handbags. Beautiful, yes, with her blonde hair and always impeccable appearance, but with a beauty that reeked of arrogance. Ethan already knew her from some social events, and each encounter made it clear. She didn't want a husband, she wanted a trophy, someone who would further enhance her name. "Dad, I don't love her. She doesn't love me. This isn't right," ventured Ethan, his voice trembling but firm. Richard slammed his fork down hard on the porcelain plate, the metallic sound echoing through the dining room. He leaned forward, his eyes cold as blades. "You talk about love like a naive boy. Love doesn't keep an empire standing. Love doesn't pay doctors, doesn't build hospitals, doesn't sustain the Collins Health Institute. What keeps all of this together is power. And power is gained through alliances. That's your function as my son." Margaret adjusted the napkin in her lap delicately, as if the tension didn't exist. Her voice came out calm, sweet even, but loaded with poison. "Richard is right, dear. We've always made the right decisions for you. It's been like that your whole life, and look where you've gotten. Why would now be different? Don't confuse freedom with weakness. Collins don't marry on a whim. They marry for legacy. The silence fell heavy, suffocating. Ethan closed his hands under the table, his knuckles white with tension. Every part of him screamed to react, but his father's voice sounded in his mind like shackles. You must. You have no choice. That night, lying in his spacious and empty room, he stared at the ceiling until dawn. Luxury everywhere, and yet he felt like a prisoner in a golden cell. A few days later, at the annual Collins Health Institute Gala cocktail party, he saw her. Victoria Hale, daughter of mogul Charles Hale, heiress to Pharma Trust, entering the ballroom as if she owned the world. Sparkling dress, calculated smile, and a gaze that swept over people as if they were objects. When introduced, Ethan realized immediately she wasn't looking for companionship. She was seeking possession. She held his hand like someone holding a contract, not like someone meeting a partner. She whispered with irony, not caring who heard. "So you're the future Collins. You'll get used to it quickly. It's easy when you know your place." Ethan smiled sideways, but inside something broke. The game was set and he was just another piece on the board. It was late afternoon when the alarm sounded at Manhattan Central Hospital. An explosion of smoke filled the streets near a corner bakery. Amid the chaos, screams echoed. A mother and baby were trapped inside. People crowded on the sidewalk, helpless, waiting for the fire truck sirens that hadn't yet appeared. The ceiling creaked about to give way. Flames licked the walls. That's when a woman, thin, with torn clothes, and her face stained with soot, threw herself inside without thinking. If I have nothing to lose, they still have everything ahead of them. Minutes later, staggering, she emerged carrying the child in her arms, coughing violently, with the desperate mother behind her. The crowd's applause was muffled by the ambulance siren that arrived at that instant to take her straight to the Collins Health Institute emergency room. Ethan was on duty that night. When he received the case, he flipped through the reports. Homeless, minor burns, severe smoke inhalation. Just another life that, for his parents, wouldn't be worth the cost of treatment. But something in him hesitated. Upon entering the room and seeing her lying there, he noticed familiar features beneath the thinness and dirt. The tired but deep eyes seemed to speak to him from another time. "Dr. Collins, she doesn't have insurance. Without resources, we can't extend the hospitalization," said a nurse, with protocol coldness. Ethan took a deep breath, staring at the form. "Leave it to me. I'll cover the expenses. New clothes, food, the best medicines, and I want daily progress reports on her." The nurse's eyes widened, but she just nodded. In the days that followed, Ethan visited the room religiously. He brought books, asked the nurses to give her baths, provided decent meals. And little by little, she began to talk. Her name, Sophie Miller. Ethan blinked, sure he had heard wrong. The sound of that surname echoed in him like a distant, almost forgotten memory. Miller. That couldn't be a coincidence. He approached slowly, like someone afraid of their own answer. "Miller, you said Miller?" Sophie tried to smile, but the pain from coughing interrupted her. "My mother worked here as a janitor a long time ago. Maybe you weren't old enough to remember." Ethan's heart raced. That detail lit a spark in his memory. He saw himself as a child again, hiding behind the hospital corridors, laughing quietly with a girl with curious eyes. A memory he had forcibly buried. "Wait." He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Your mother was named Mary? Mary Miller?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes." The certainty hit him like a punch. The room seemed to spin. "Wait. You're Sophie? The girl who used to hide behind the nursing station counter. I used to bring you chocolates, remember?" She widened her eyes, surprised, almost unable to believe it. "My God, you were that boy. The one who would make up stories with me when my mother was cleaning the corridors. You said I wouldn't spend my whole life there." Ethan let out a bitter laugh, but his eyes were teary. "I never forgot. And then, they sent you and your mother away. They said I couldn't see you anymore. At that time, Ethan was only 12 years old, but his father, Richard Collins, already controlled every step of his life, as if he were a puppet. When he discovered his son's innocent friendship with the janitor's daughter, he didn't hesitate to crush it. He fired Mary Miller from the hospital that same day without the right to explanation, without the right to goodbye, and made it clear to the boy he never wanted to see him near people like them again. Sophie's face hardened for an instant, before crumbling into silent tears. I know. To them, my mother and I were never more than a nuisance. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with years of injustice. Ethan closed his eyes, his chest tight. He felt guilt, but also something stronger. The feeling that fate was giving him a second chance to correct everything his parents had destroyed. In the days that followed, Ethan couldn't get Sophie out of his head. Each visit to her room was a living reminder of everything that had been stolen from him as a child. Her simplicity contrasted with the suffocating pomp of his family. Meanwhile, his parents were already planning every detail of the wedding with Victoria Hale. Richard Collins appeared at dinners with pharmaceutical industry leaders, boasting about the strategic alliance he was about to consolidate. For him, his son was nothing more than a piece on the corporate board. Richard told Ethan in closed conversations that the Collins Health Institute desperately needed that union to survive. With each phrase, he painted a dark picture: bankruptcy, loss of prestige, public shame. But it was a lie. The institute was solid, with growing profits. The old man just wanted more power, more influence. And as always, he used his son as currency. With each phone call, each family meeting, Ethan felt the pressure increase. His mother, elegant and cold as a statue, repeated, "Son, it's not about love. It's about legacy. Sacrifices need to be made to keep the Collins name where it belongs." But his heart was already somewhere else. In the hospital, in a simple bed, was the only person who reminded him of who he really was. For days, Ethan fought in silence. Every time he visited Sophie, he felt the abyss between what his parents planned for him and what his heart screamed. At night, alone in his luxurious apartment, he stared at the ceiling, remembering his father's words. Sacrifices need to be made for the Collins legacy. But for the first time, that phrase no longer made sense. The next morning, after a long shift, Ethan entered her room. The morning sun came through the hospital curtains, illuminating Sophie's face. She was still fragile, but there was something in her eyes that seemed stronger than any diamond: courage. He approached slowly, like someone carrying a huge decision on their shoulders. He sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. "Sophie, I've spent my whole life obeying. Studying at the college they chose, dressing how they wanted, accepting the lies they told me. But when I look at you, I see the only part of my life that was true. And I'm not going to lose that again." She frowned, surprised. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He held her hand firmly. "I want to choose for myself, for the first time. And my choice is you. Marry me. Today. Before they try to take this away from me too." Her heart raced. Sophie pulled back a little, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You can't be serious. I'm nothing compared to what they expect from you. They'll never accept it." Ethan smiled, but there was pain behind the smile. "They already took you away from me once. If I let them, they'll take you away again. And I'd rather lose everything I have than live without knowing what it would be like if we fought together." Tears flooded Sophie's eyes. She still trembled, torn between fear and hope. But seeing the firmness in his gaze, something inside her surrendered. "If this is real, if you won't regret it—" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," he interrupted, squeezing her hand. She took a deep breath, swallowed her tears, and let a fragile smile escape. "Then yes, I'll marry you." Hours later, already outside the hospital, Ethan walked still in his lab coat, marked by the stains from the previous night's rush. Beside him, Sophie wore a simple dress borrowed from the nurses, somewhat wrinkled but which on her seemed more precious than silk. The cold morning wind blew against their faces, messing up her hair, and each step seemed to lift from Ethan a weight he had carried his whole life. They laughed nervously, like two children who had just escaped from mischief, but deep down they knew. This was more than adventure. It was liberation. There was no limousine, no inherited ring from generations. There were only intertwined hands and hearts beating out of rhythm, accelerated by fear and joy. When they approached the courthouse, Sophie stopped for a moment, took a deep breath and looked at Ethan. In that look, he perceived the mixture of disbelief and hope. She couldn't believe that someone would choose love over power, especially him. Ethan squeezed her hand hard and smiled, a smile that said, "I'm finally the owner of my life, and it's with you that I want to live it." And under the soft morning sunlight, the two crossed the courthouse door like crossing into a new world, not with luxury, but with courage. The Hale house shone like a palace that night. Crystal chandeliers illuminated halls filled with men in impeccable suits, and women in dresses that seemed to cost small fortunes. The dinner table was so long it seemed endless, covered with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses clinking with French champagne. It was there that everyone expected to see Ethan officially announce his engagement to Victoria Hale. Murmurs circulated among the guests. A perfect marriage, union of two dynasties, the smartest move of the decade. Richard Collins was at the center of the table, radiating false pride, and Victoria paraded as if she were already queen, with that cold smile that didn't hide her contempt for everyone around. She leaned in to whisper to the guests, always throwing phrases loaded with venom, making it clear that she saw Ethan more as a trophy than as a future husband. But that night, something was different. Ethan entered alone, without his usual submissive air. He wore a simple suit, nothing that resembled the starched outfits his father chose for him. He walked calmly to the main table, feeling every gaze turned to him. The atmosphere, previously festive, plunged into uncomfortable silence. Richard received him with a look loaded with expectation, and Victoria smiled like someone already savoring victory. Ethan raised his glass and left the entire ballroom suspended in heavy silence. The lights reflected on his face, but there was no longer a shadow of doubt in his eyes. Each second of pause was torture for those present, until he finally spoke. "Good evening, everyone. I know what you expect from me today. You expect me to announce an engagement, to confirm a union carefully planned to please families, contracts, and fortunes. But I didn't come here to confirm any of that. I came to confess." A murmur ran among the guests, like muffled thunder. Victoria adjusted herself in her chair, smiling nervously, not understanding. Richard, deep down, already felt disaster approaching, and clenched his fist until his knuckles turned white. Ethan took a deep breath, set his glass on the table and faced each face, one by one, before delivering. "I am no longer engaged to Victoria Hale, because I'm already a married man." The phrase fell like dynamite. The ballroom exploded in screams and gasps. Glasses shattered against the floor. Some ladies put their hands to their chests, and the men exchanged astonished looks. Victoria stood up so abruptly that the chair toppled behind her. The flush of anger took over her face. "You've lost your mind. This has to be a joke. Who would have the audacity to—" But the answer came before she even finished. The ballroom doors opened slowly, and Sophie entered. A simple blue dress molded her silhouette, and her loose hair, still marked by that morning's rain, shone under the chandelier light. There were no jewels, no elaborate makeup. There was only pure, authentic beauty that instantly made all eyes turn to her. "Ethan, what's happening here?" Victoria asked, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan, instead of being shaken, took a deep breath, and then opened a light, almost provocative smile. He pulled Sophie to the center of the ballroom and announced with a firm voice that echoed under the crystal chandeliers, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mrs. Sophie Miller, Collins, my wife." A heavy silence fell over the ballroom. The gazes turned as if the world had stopped. Victoria, pale, her heart racing. And it was in that instant, seeing Sophie standing beside him, that Victoria's confusion turned into despair and hatred. Her face turned red, her whole body trembled. "No, this is unacceptable. You traded the daughter of a mogul for this? For the daughter of a janitor? A woman who slept on the street?" she screamed, her voice echoing in the ballroom. The shock was immediate. Glasses slipped from guests' hands. Some men put their hands to their mouths, and Richard Collins exploded in a roar of fury. "You're going crazy, Ethan. I'm going to disinherit you, you senseless brat. You'll end up with nothing, like a beggar, and all because of this woman." But Ethan didn't shrink. He squeezed Sophie's hand even tighter, raised his chin, and, with icy irony, responded, "Yes, Daddy Collins. Maybe I am crazy, but what if, in reality, for the first time in my life, I'm completely sane? You talk about disinheriting me as if it were punishment. But you know what I see? Freedom. I'm tired of living like the perfect puppet in your theater of power. You can keep your money, you can keep your empire. I don't want any of it. The only thing I want is right here beside me, and that, not all your money in the world can buy." Richard went pale, consumed with fury. Victoria collapsed in her chair, sobbing with rage. The guests murmured among themselves, in absolute shock. Margaret stepped forward, her voice trembling, almost a desperate whisper. "Ethan, son, please, think carefully. We gave everything to you. All our effort, all our dreams. Everything was for your future. Are you going to throw away the life we built?" "No, Mother. You never built anything for me. You built for yourselves. I was just the brick in the wall of your ego. You molded me, silenced me, dressed me like a trophy, and had the courage to call that love. Love that suffocates isn't love, it's prison. And you know what hurts most? It wasn't just him, Mother. It was you too. You saw me bleed for years and chose silence. Always silence." A shiver ran through the ballroom. Margaret put her hand to her mouth in shock. Ethan took a deep breath and concluded, with a firmness that made even the most powerful lower their eyes. "If living your life means dying a little more every day, then burning this inheritance is the best gift you could give me. Because today, for the first time, I breathe like a free man." And in the middle of the chaos, Ethan and Sophie looked at each other with complicity. He pulled her by the hand, crossing the ballroom with his head held high, while behind them echoed screams, insults, and the fall of an empire. The ballroom became a battlefield. Richard Collins exploded with rage, his face red, while Victoria Hale, humiliated in front of everyone, screamed hysterically that she wouldn't accept it, that Ethan would regret it. Her father, the pharmaceutical industry mogul, stood up from the table and pointed his finger at Richard's face, accusing him of having stained the most profitable deal of their lives. In seconds, two of the country's most powerful families were trading accusations like mortal enemies. Margaret sobbed in silence, without strength to face the truth thrown by Ethan minutes before. Her image as perfect mother of the American elite had shattered in front of everyone. 6 years had passed since that night when Ethan dared to defy his own blood. With hard work and some bold loans, he and Sophie opened a small clinic in a simple neighborhood. In the beginning, the walls were narrow, the resources almost non-existent, but the hearts of both were bigger than any obstacle. Ethan worked as an on-call doctor. Sophie took care of the administrative part and, in her spare time, studied. For the first time, she had the chance to dream big, and Ethan was the first to encourage her. 6 years later, Sophie Miller Collins was no longer just the lost girl from the past. She graduated in law and opened, together with her husband, a renowned law firm specializing in medical cases. The clinic that started with an improvised room transformed into a national health network, respected for its efficiency and humanity, a network that, in numbers and reputation, surpassed the Collins Health Institute itself. And what once seemed impossible happened. The wealth that Ethan and Sophie built together exceeded the fortune that his father had spent his entire life trying to accumulate at the expense of manipulation and control. On a sunny morning, In front of the new headquarters of the network, Sophie raised the inauguration plaque beside Ethan. He smiled and said quietly, just for her, "Remember when they said I was crazy?" Sophie squeezed his hand, looking into his eyes with a gleam of triumph. "Yeah, Ethan. In the end, you were just right." There, in front of hundreds of people, it became clear. While the Collins empire crumbled, the Collins and Miller empire flourished, built not by fear or greed, but by love, courage, and the desire to win together. And that was the incredible turnaround of Ethan and Sophie. Now tell me, what would you have done in his place? Would you have had the courage to face your own family for love? I want to read your opinion in the comments. And before you leave, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and leave a like. Because here we always have emotional stories that you won't be able to stop listening to.